Racial discrimination in American history had not just been limited to restrictive voting rights and segregation practices. For example, one lesser known but significant type of restriction happened in the American real estate market, particularly in the 1940s and 1950s. This process was reinforced through the legal system by restrictive covenants.
A restrictive covenant is a legal agreement that was often included within the deed of a property or house to define who could rent or buy that property. Restrictive covenants made racial segregation in American housing communities possible because it was legally able to keep racial minorities from moving into certain neighborhoods. If a restrictive covenant was violated, the property's previous owner, or even the community in which the property resides, can bring legal action against the agreement's violator.
Although they were created earlier, restrictive covenants were most popular in the post-World War II era, large cities and industrial centers such as Detroit and Chicago. Even locally, in San Francisco, San Leandro, and Oakland, this form of systematic racism in housing took place. White communities would not allow American minorities to rent or buy housing because they feared their property values would decline. As a result, these communities collectively agreed to protect their property values by using restrictive covenants to only allow white renters and buyers. This created racially segregated community neighborhoods. White communities often had better infrastructure, schools, and were closer to better paying jobs. Landowners also often took advantage of these minorities by charging high rents and letting the buildings deteriorate, because they knew minorities had significantly less housing options.
Although restrictive covenants are now illegal, they have created a legacy that continues to affect Americans in their everyday lives in communities across the country. In this video, we will try to better understand restrictive covenants and their continued legacy by looking at some historical examples within the Bay Area in San Francisco and Oakland.
One case that represents the key issues with restrictive covenants involved Horace and Anne Fong in Oakland. While Anne was white, her husband Horace was Chinese American. When they purchased their home at 9323 Granada Avenue in the Oak Knoll Country Club of Oakland in 1946, they were met with heavy resistance from the Oak Knoll Improvement Association. The association, which was made up of the homeowners of an entirely white neighborhood, cited the racially restrictive policies in the club's covenant to claim that Horace had no right to move in. It didn't matter that Horace was a wounded World War II veteran and a wealthy, respected businessman who had legally purchased his home. Just because he was not Caucasian, the association believed that the value of their homes would decrease with his move into their neighborhood. Although the Fongs sued for discrimination and won their case, the couple ultimately sold their house and moved out of their neighborhood, largely due to the continued discrimination and hostile environment they faced. No matter what the court ruled, it did not change the minds or behaviors of the people who wrote these covenants in the first place.
Even Willie Mays, the famous African-American baseballer for the San Francisco Giants, was a victim of racially selective housing policies. When Mays attempted to purchase a house in the exclusive Forest Hills area of San Francisco in 1957, he was turned down because of his skin color. It took the involvement of the local NAACP chapter, as well as the mayor of San Francisco, before Mays was able to purchase the house. The restrictive covenant on that property was dismissed due to Mays' status and fame, but in reality, countless minorities continued to fall victim to discriminatory housing practices outside of the public eye. Endemic racism and discriminatory behavior have been strong secondary barriers against full integration and equality in neighborhoods. These issues were usually unrecognized except in rare occasions where the victims were well known or had the means to fight back legally. Fighting institutional racism was a long and often futile struggle. However, many people who fell victim to discriminatory housing practices were able to band together and bring real changes at the national level. The landmark case of Shelley versus Kramer in 1948 made it illegal for federal courts to enforce racial covenants for real estate. Legislation such as the Home Mortgage Disclosure Act of 1975 and the Community Reinvestment Act of 1977 have empowered communities to hold lending institutions and realty groups accountable for discriminatory practices. Although these legal decisions are an important part of achieving equality, it's only one step. Discrimination in America is something that cannot be faced alone. The long-lasting effects of racial covenants have negatively affected all minority groups. Restrictive covenants kept colored minorities such as African Americans, Asian Americans, and Mexican Americans from having the same access to these neighborhood benefits as white Americans. It is important to remember that the combined voices of many is what it takes to enact real change. In order to truly secure equality, we must work together within our communities and other organizations. Let us collectively decide to end the effects of restrictive covenants, first by understanding their place in history, and then by ensuring that this discrimination can no longer exist in the United States. Let us understand that minority generations born long after restrictive covenants were made illegal continue to live through these effects today, with less opportunities for growth and achievement. Let us hold our politicians accountable for investing in these generations and minority generations of the future. Not every person suffering from discriminatory housing policies has the voice of someone like Willie Mays. Let us be their voice.